Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Star Wars Stuff Podcast. My name is David.
This is Jonesy.
And I am Albert.
And this is where we talk about all things Star Wars. And yes, I am joined by Jonesy and Albert. I've been trying to get these guys to join me on a podcast for a while now. I've been listening to these guys for a while. And actually, I have a very funny story to talk about on air here. I don't think I've ever spoken about.
I don't think I know this story.
Involving, no, you don't know it.
Oh, great.
Involving their podcast, the Cantina Cast. And
yeah, look at the time. I got to go, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on. We'll see you next week.
I'll talk about it in just a second. But before that, I do want to recognize our awesome top-tier Patreon supporters, starting with Darth Ace 1, Liam McCallan, Chris Simpson, Kevin Leininger, Devin McCaffrey, Drew Peters, Zach Netzel, Maya Morris, Maka Taltala, Adam Haber, Brad Mackey, Front Row King, and Darth Beard. Thank you so much for awesome love and support. And to the story. So back in, it was last decade, 2019, we all went to Chicago Celebration.
Yeah.
And there was a podcaster meetup. And I didn't know a lot of Star Wars podcasters. My kind of podcasting origin story, I've talked about it a long time ago in our first few episodes. I felt there was a big void in Star Wars podcasting. So that was one of the onuses why I created a podcast. But I didn't know about the Cantina Cast. You guys were, I think, came around shortly after when I tried to get into podcasting long way back. But I had no idea about you guys. But I went to the podcasting meetup. And there's a lot of people there in Chicago.
Oh, it was crazy.
It was busy, yeah.
And it was like a bar setup, bar/restaurant. There was
in the
tons
hotel.
of people.
Yeah, the hotel bar.
And I possibly met you guys and didn't know it, but someone handed me a T-shirt, and it said Cantina Cast. I was like, wow, that's a cool name for a podcast. And I was like, I wonder who these guys are. And then another person came up to me and said, hey, have a T-shirt. And I got another T-shirt and said Cantina Cast. I was like, okay, I got another Cantina Cast T-shirt.
This definitely sounds like us, like hitting the same person over and over.
Right.
So it's probably you. So another guy walks up to me and hands me another T-shirt. And I was like, okay, some more swag. And I open it up. It's like Cantina Cast.
No
I'm like,
way.
Oh, I got all
What?
these Cantina Cast T-shirts now. And I was like, well, I mean, I'll have T-shirts to spare here when I get back to Texas. So I take the T-shirts, I bring them home, and I'm like, I wonder when I'm gonna meet these guys or have these guys on the podcast. So tonight is the night. I have the guys here.
Oh my gosh, it's 5 years later.
Well, we actually ran into each other
In
I think
Anaheim,
in 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You
remember
guys
that.
were at a food truck, and I recognized you, and I was like, hey,
I was walking
Albert,
by, you're like,
Jonesy.
hey, yeah, you're like, hey, Jonesy. I'm like, oh, shh.
You're like, who are you?
No, it caught me off guard. Like,
I was like, I listen to you guys all the time. And then one of the guys I named here on Patreon, Maka, walked up behind me, and he saw me there for the first time. So it was like me trying to talk to you, trying to talk to one of
yeah. I
our huge
remember that.
Patreon supporters. And yeah, it was a good time. And I was like, man, it was just like such a kind of a sensory overload there, being there at Celebration and trying to get stuff done. And
you know,
go to
funny story
panels.
about those T-shirts back in 2019. We had the boxes of shirts. We had bought, how many did we buy? Like,
It was a
like
lot. We
100?
bought a lot. Yeah.
And we had the boxes like shipped to Illinois to a friend up there.
Oh,
and
okay.
to be able to like have them all there, and we did not want to go home with these things.
Right.
So we made sure that they were like, we gave them out to our friends and everything. Like, get rid of these things. We had Albert's brother giving them out at a meetup we did too, and so that you ended
Dunkin'
up with
Donuts. We gave them out everywhere. It wasn't just Star Wars related stuff.
Yeah.
It's like anywhere we could find, we're just throwing these shirts out. Yeah.
We slapped stickers anywhere we could find it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're glad that the media blitz worked for you in some way.
Yeah, I just didn't know who you guys were yet, and I was like,
We still don't know.
Cast.
Yeah.
We're still in pursuit of identity ourselves at this point.
Well, yeah, just so our audience knows, these guys have done a panel at Star Wars Celebration before. And
Two.
what was it? Chicago? Or
Two
was
panels. We
Anaheim?
did it in
Two times.
2019 and 2021, 22, whatever it was.
222, yeah.
Yeah.
2022, Anaheim.
Yeah, 2019 was just Jonesy and I. And then in 2022, we were on stage with Tarkin's Top Shelf, and we had Claudia Gray on as well. So all five of us, I think, or six of us at that point.
Wow.
That was
That's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're here tonight. Bender is on YouTube. We have people watch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Bender says, hello. Hello, Bender. How are you?
Hey, Bender.
So there's two big topics that I do want to talk about and get your guys' opinions on. Um, the Peter Cushing story that dropped today. There is an entity out there that's claiming that they made a deal right before Peter Cushing passed away that they would receive royalties on anything that, which is incredible foresight if it's that specific for people to digitally recreate Peter Cushing in anything, I guess. And of course, Star Wars would be the most logical thing that I think they would maybe assume. Possibly that's why they kind of went for that. But the thing is, it looks like Disney got permission from Peter Cushing's estate to use his likeness, but this other new entity is claiming that there was like a deal that was done and now they're owed money. And apparently, I know this Rogue One came out in 2016.
Right.
Been a while.
It's been 8 years, and that's kind of terrifying. It's been that long now. And of course, Rogue One is so beloved now. It seems like it's fine wine. It's just getting better in fans' eyes, and of course, people rediscovering it. So Disney doesn't appear to be at fault because they're claiming that they didn't know about this like deal that was happening and asked the court to throw it out. But the court didn't throw it out, so litigation might happen. But it feels like Disney checked all the right boxes and are kind of on the up and up on this. Do you guys know anything or have any kind of like opinion or thoughts on this, Jonesy?
Yeah, I think like you said, Disney seems like they at least made a fair attempt or a reasonable attempt to make sure that they followed the right criteria to make sure it was permissible and that everybody was agreed to it because they agreed with the estate. And then I think they also made a payment to the agency, right, that he was a part of. So again, there was good faith, I think, operating here. So if they didn't know, if there was an agreement on the side that wasn't known, it appears just to not any kind of malice, I think, in any part of that arrangement. It just seems to be an oversight or just didn't know. That the court didn't throw it out may mean that there is some merit there. So there might be something there. I don't think this is going to be a millions of dollars type of thing. It's kind of a black eye. And we were talking about this with James Earl Jones, right? He's given the permission for Disney and Lucasfilm to be able to use his voice, right, with AI and all of that. We kind of talked about, is it you kind of do your best effort to plan ahead. And of course, Peter Cushing has been dead for 2 decades, I think now, 21 years, something like that.
He died in 93.
Yeah. So it's been a really long time. So none of this stuff existed back then. And why, I think Bender in the chat, brought this up too. It's been 8 years. Like, why now versus before? Or has this been like, are they just now seeing Rogue One? They just now know Star Wars is a thing? I don't know.
Well,
But
there
it's
is
just
an
kind of
answer.
interesting.
There's a very logical answer to that. Apparently, they submitted this a while back, and
Yeah. Okay.
just the whole like litigation process takes a while, apparently. And
Gotcha.
this kind of came to the limelight here. So yeah, this was submitted a while back. We just don't know what the timeline was, but yeah, it's been 8 years, and I thought everything was all good. Thankfully, you brought up James Earl Jones there. He has given Lucasfilm, Disney permission to go ahead and use his voice as Darth Vader. So that's the last I heard of that. So we're good there. So
Yeah.
Albert, what do you think about all this?
$37,000 was paid to the estate, right, of Cushing. So to Jonesy's point, I think you've said the same thing now. It does sound like, there was no, misintent here in terms of what they were trying to do. I get that someone's probably going to go after them. It's Disney. So if you have an opportunity to go get some money from them, sure, you're going to try to get it. And if you're Disney, if someone's coming at you for money, you're probably going to try to kick this out, get it thrown out of the courts. That's just kind of a natural thing. Doesn't necessarily implicate them on anything. It's just that I'm sure they get hit with lawsuits all the time for frivolous things. The idea that they had the foresight, I think you brought this up, or maybe Jones and I were talking about this too. The idea that he had the foresight to put this in, go to the last will and testament, or have this in writing back when he died ahead of time is kind of remarkable in some ways. And I'm not trying to say there's anything sinister here or by any means, but it is interesting that they were thinking that far ahead, that likeness couldn't be used. So I am curious of, the devil's probably in the details. I'd love to see exactly what it says in there. But I think, if this does go to court and it stays in the courts, I would imagine Disney's going to settle. It'll be interesting to see how much money he's actually going for. I didn't get the chance to see if he's got a number in there, if they have a number yet. I said 37,000 because that seems kind of small in my opinion to pay the estate for the likeness that they use. But
Right.
if he's coming after millions of dollars, I think that's probably a little too much and probably a little bit more too extreme. But again, devil's in details, and it really depends on what was this arrangement between him and what was this guy's name, Francis or whatever his name was, Kevin Francis.
Yeah, there's some like interesting like name that's tied to all this, but
Right.
yeah, I mean it's kind of a, I don't know, odd situation. It felt kind of fishy to me on the surface, but I mean, like
Yeah.
you said, if the judge didn't throw it out, I mean there must be some merit. But it feels like maybe Disney is like kind of out of this because the money was paid, and maybe the entity should go after the Cushing estate if they're looking for compensation because they really should have known,
Yeah.
not Disney. I mean,
Yeah, go after the deepest pockets, right?
yeah.
And with the onset of AI and likeness, the James Earl Jones stuff, this is going to come up more and more. I expect, right? Certainly as technology continues to advance, and again, to call back to the James Earl Jones stuff, this was 2 years ago that he signed over his voice rights, and we got to see and hear, I should say, James Earl Jones's voice by way of AI through respeech in the Kenobi series. And 2 years ago, I thought they did a pretty darn good job. 2 years ago is like 20 lifetimes in the terms of AI. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing what if, Vader comes back in another show 2-3 years from now. I'm really interested to hear what it sounds like, because the advancements are so severe just, within 6 months, that there will become a point where, the likeness of Peter Cushing will look so realistic. The likeness of any actor that signs over their likeness to movie studios for those characters to live on. And just kind of segue into an interesting topic that I think that we were talking about too with James Earl Jones is, we asked the question of like, what is James Earl Jones's legacy? Is it Darth Vader? Is it Mufasa? Is it some of the other work he did? I think right now it's probably a tie between Vader and Mufasa, depending on your generation and what you grew up with. But 50 years from now, when he signed over the rights to Lucasfilm to do Darth Vader, Vader is suddenly relevant 50 years from now. And so it's almost like they're turning over that legacy and saying, I want this to be my legacy, whether they mean that, willfully or not. It's essentially what's going to happen. So it's very interesting to see these characters. I pose the idea or the hypothesis, like, what if Harrison Ford gave over his likeness for Indiana Jones, and we continue to get Indiana Jones content? Ford has done so many amazing things. He's been in so many different roles over his career. But if that's the case, and it's explicitly for Indiana Jones, that becomes his legacy, right? He's signing off his name as saying, I'm this character forever and ever. It's just fascinating to think about and how things are going to change when we look back on characters and certainly actors' work.
Yeah, and if you guys remember all the way back to the 90s, I think it was, there was a Super Bowl commercial that I think it was one of the vacuum cleaner companies. They had Fred Astaire dancing with a vacuum.
Yeah.
And it caused like this big old like hubbub in the media, and people were freaking out like, okay, so what's going to happen? Are we just going to like do return on all the actors and all the dead actors, and we're going to bring back like all these people? Is this going to be the future? Are there going to be no new actors? And of course, in the 90s, I mean, the processing power back then and the technology was like maybe not even existent really back then. I don't really remember how they did the whole Fred Astaire thing. It might have been like taking his existing dancing and kind of melding it with like some type of like green screen or something. That's maybe how they did it, because of course there's no like AI or digital like face mapping or anything. But yeah, I mean, I can totally see. I mean, the possibilities are really kind of endless when you really think about it. And we talk about on the podcast all the time how there's so much opportunity to do things that are associated to the Skywalker saga, the original trilogy, that they're not really taking advantage of right now. And it's like, well, I mean, the big three have kind of aged out for the most part. But there are opportunities for other actors to come in and do something now, and like don't wait for them to get too old so they age out. But
I think you do see the legacy, the people thinking about their legacy more often than not. And now that you have tools like AI and you have avenues and pathways to be able to do that, I think actors are a little more savvy about what, especially if you do have iconic roles like our favorite characters in Star Wars all do in their own ways. I think at least you have alternatives to be able to continue to provide for your family from a legacy and historical perspective, or for the foreseeable future. while also doing it in the right way and doing it in a way that you feel comfortable. Like you're putting it in the hands of, I will say whether we trust them or not, depending on your perspective, there varies, but at least you can do it on your own terms and feel like you're getting a fair wage from it and a fair return on it from rather than someone just abusing it and using it like maybe some of the concerns that arose in the original 90s when this started to come about. And of course now with, even the technology was just starting to get really, really good to where, like with Peter Cushing, the uncanny valley, discussion and debate that we had,
Right.
those types of things are much less of a concern now. And it's the fine tuning of it that's starting to happen now. So I'm glad they can at least do it on their own terms now.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is this was one of the topics that was big during the actor strike, right? The likeness and the use of their face and all of that. I don't know what the end result of that was. I'm sure they didn't get everything they wanted, but this will continue to be refined over time as technology gets better. I think one of the questions, if you don't mind, David, I want to get your thoughts because I don't know your opinion on this.
Yeah.
We talked a lot, especially when Carrie Fisher passed, right? And there was a lot of discussion about whether or not they should replace her. Should they bring another actor in or actress in? Should they use technology to create her? Is that the right thing to do? Should they have let her, character just die off screen and not bring her back in The Rise of Skywalker? All these questions were at play, and there was a lot of debate, a lot of discussion around that. And I think, and I don't want to speak for Jonesy, I think my stance has always been, I've always felt the characters are bigger than the actors. And I do want the characters to live on beyond, I think we owe it to other generations to love these characters as much as we do. And so when there's an opportunity for an actor or an actress to hand over their digital rights, I actually think that's a pretty big deal. And it's very commendable that they would do something like that. I don't feel like just because an actress dies, even as symbiotic and as close and intertwined as Carrie Fisher's personality is with Princess Leia, I still felt like, the character was still bigger, and I did want her to kind of live on and see her in The Rise of Skywalker or whatever else. But I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Or what side are you on? Do you feel like, no, put it to rest, bring in another character later on, reboot the whole thing? Where do you stand on that?
At the time, I was thinking, man, an awesome tribute to Carrie Fisher would be to bring in someone like a Meryl Streep to play General Leia. I thought that would have been really cool. But in hindsight, I think the right move was to have Carrie Fisher's likeness using the old footage that they did. But that puts the creatives and the filmmakers in kind of a corner there as far as the storytelling goes. So it didn't turn out the best. But now with like the tools they have today, they could have probably just recreated her from scratch and used speech technology and all that. I think the way to go is always getting permission from the estate, and of course Billy Lord,
for
her
sure,
daughter, is
yeah.
there.
Agree 100%.
Getting, at the very end, Carrie Fisher was very, very into the fandom and going to Celebration and embracing all the fans, and I have no doubt that she would have been like, yeah, I want to do it. This is my legacy. And the funny story that pops into my head now is when she went to go see Mark Hamill perform on Broadway, and she saw Mark Hamill's credits, and it was like this, and Star Wars was like 5th on the list or something, and she straight up told him, "You're Luke Skywalker, I'm Princess Leia. Get over it. Get over yourself." So, Star Wars is so huge. It's just insane how big Star Wars is, and we've talked about it on the podcast so many times that it penetrates every culture, every race, gender, family. Everyone has a Star Wars story, and I'd love to eventually hear your guys' story on maybe a separate podcast, how you came to Star Wars or how Star Wars came to you. But getting permission from the state is I think a moral thing to do. I think that's really the best way to go. If another
right
situation like this arises, but for someone like Carrie Fisher, I think no one had any type of like debate or question as to having her post The Last Jedi in The Rise of Skywalker and having it go the way it went. Unfortunately, I don't think the outcome was as good as it could have been with the new tools or whatever. But they were kind of like hands tied. So
I think one of the challenges Disney's going to be, and not to make it all a legal discussion, but
Yeah.
Albert was saying, the smart money is to settle, right? You don't want to bring this to court. It's going to be really costly and expensive, but I think they almost have to make sure that it doesn't encourage and set a precedent for behaviors that you can just kind of go after the deep pockets, and you still protect, like, hey, we did the right thing. Yeah, we might need to still do restitutions if there's something that we did wrong, or we overlooked, really, not did wrong, but just overlooked. That's all fine and dandy, but we still have to go through the proceedings of it
Right.
in order to come to the right outcome, rather than just cave, even though it will cost way more than they'll probably have to pay if they were to settle. But I think they still have to go through the motion of it just to protect the rest of the business, so it doesn't encourage bad actors, so to speak, to come in here and do this type of lawsuit more regularly. Because like Albert was saying, I think they probably get peppered with stuff a lot. If you work for any big company, you get peppered with a lot of lawsuits or people just trying to take advantage of your deep pockets.
Yep. I agree with that. So the next thing I want to talk about is, of course, a lot of people have seen this and have made comments and asked me questions about it. But actually, before that, though, I wanted to bring this up because I always like talking about this because it's a very interesting kind of story. I have a picture I'm going to put up on here on video. So Guy Henry is the actor that was underneath the dots and the face cam for Grand Moff Tarkin. He's an actor that I think everyone's seen in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I guess spoiler alert for that movie. He's one of the guys that Voldemort actually kills. But the story is they found this guy, Guy Henry, in England, an actor, professional actor, and he kind of looks like Grand Moff Tarkin in a way, but he's about the same height. He's a taller man. And it just so happened that the only impression he knew to do was a Peter Cushing impression, because he was such a fan of the Hammer horror films, and he was basically just a huge fan, and he does no other impressions except for Peter Cushing, and it worked out. I mean, he played the role, but of course now with all the new technology, I don't think the situation will ever maybe happen again with these bigger studios, because they're going to be able to just recreate someone from scratch in digital. But I always like to bring that up. That's one of my favorite Star Wars stories.
So, David, do you think they should have just gone with Guy Henry, just straightforward, no CGI? Do you think you think we would have bought into that and thought that would have been good enough? Given that there is a striking likeness to him.
Right. I love the attempt, though. I love the infusion of the latest technology that they try to implement in Star Wars. Because that's part of Star Wars' legacy, that they're breaking ground. They're on bleeding edge technology, like with the volume, with blue screen, with motion tracking. I mean, that's what you do when you do a Star Wars. You try and go to the extreme, and I loved that attempt. And you guys brought up the Uncanny Valley. Yeah, you can see it, but a lot of people couldn't, and a lot of people thought that was actually Peter Cushing, and that's an impressive feat. But yeah, there is some aspects of Uncanny Valley in there. But
I think us tech nerds left the theater, or I remember sitting in the theater watching it. I'm like, holy smokes, they got really close. I mean, we had not seen anything like this before in 2016, and be able to get that close to it, it was like our eyes were open to like, this is a real possibility. Like, this could actually work.
Yeah. I think about Alden Ehrenreich.
Right.
I don't know that he necessarily looks like a Harrison Ford, but within minutes, it didn't take me long for that suspension of disbelief. Like, I was hooked in. I was like, okay, this is Solo. So I think when there's an opportunity to have a real actor, I think that it feels like that is the best thing to do. Maybe I'm just a little bit more anti-AI, anti-synthetic in general, but I think that's always the best course. But there will come a time, and maybe we're already there, we're on the cusp of it, but there will come a time when we will not be able to distinguish between what is AI versus what is, re-speech. The technology is just getting so much better. The only exception to this is, and not to throw shade on Indiana Jones, the more recent Indiana Jones movie, but there were moments on there where it was like flawless, and then there were moments where it didn't look as good.
And then
but it's just a continual refinement. It's a continual improvement. It's not much longer. 5-10 years from now, they will probably be able to recreate whoever they want on the fly. I mean, we're already seeing it now. Like, I've been watching. I do follow AI pretty quickly, and there are some algorithms, some programs out there where in real time, as somebody's talking, the AI generated picture is keeping up with it, right? It's just that good. It's that quick. It's that powerful now. And so that just changes the whole way you make movies too, right? They could actually have an actor on screen film once or film like they normally would and let the AI just do everything on the fly. That's scary to think about, but at the same time, like you said, the innovation here is pretty amazing. So I'm in favor of it if it's used morally and ethically. But yeah, I don't know that having actors come in and step in, playing another younger version or an older version, I think those times are probably very short-lived at this point. I think that's not going to be the way that most people are going to go.
People want to still be grounded in something that feels real, right?
For sure.
And I think to your point, it's these really truly iconic characters that are really difficult to not associate with the original actor. And I think Indiana Jones is such a great example of that, to where you like, I don't know who else you would have fill that role. And they, even when we talked about Shia LaBeouf kind of coming in and doing that, it just didn't feel right. Right? It's just so iconic, and that is Harrison Ford, right? And to be able to do anything differently than that just doesn't feel like that would be the right move, right? So
Yeah.
Han Solo, I was much more forgiving with that actually, and I thought with a younger version it made sense. But we saw Indy in different stages of his life a little bit, and even with River Phoenix, some people felt a little uncomfortable with some of that too. They don't look enough like him or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting debate though.
Yeah, us talking about this kind of brings up one of the questions that I like to pose to guests and guest hosts. It feels like everything that was popular is going to be remade.
Yeah.
So eventually, the original trilogy is going to be remade.
Yeah.
So it's probably not this decade, maybe not next decade, but maybe the decade after that, or maybe even next decade. Who knows? Depending on how everything goes with Star Wars, Lucasfilm, and Disney. What are your thoughts on remaking the original trilogy? And to kind of put what we're talking about, what are your thoughts with recasting or maybe just redoing it possibly? I mean, would that even make sense to have Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill's likenesses back on screen and maybe not the same exact films? Maybe they go kind of like the route of Lord of the Rings and like do appendices type things, or kind of maybe go back to the novels and whatever other extra material they can maybe add to and kind of fill out these movies in a remake. What do you guys think about that?
Go for it, Albert. You got a lot to say.
We've been doing this long enough. We know each other's answers, and yeah, I don't know. So
we have this debate a lot, or
we have this debate a lot, and I don't. Yeah, so at the risk of never coming back onto the show, here's my opinion, and it aligns with what I said earlier, where I do feel like the characters are bigger than the actors. Okay. At some point, it is of my opinion that Star Wars will be rebooted. Right, not in my lifetime, but at some point it probably will be rebooted. And here's where some of my testimony comes from. With my kids, I've got 5 kids. When I try to show them some of the older Star Wars, it really doesn't resonate with them. Right, the original trilogy, as much as I love it, as much as I try to get them hyped up for it, they're not into it. Right, they'll watch it because Dad wants them to watch it, and it's cool, it's fun, right? But they see through it. They see the imperfections in the quality and the lightsaber effects and some of the dialogue, and they're comparing that to what they grew up with, which is basically the sequel trilogy. That's their Star Wars, right? Yeah. Their Star Wars is a sequel trilogy. So it's a very difficult and very hard sell for me at times. As they get older, I think they'll start to appreciate it more, right? For all the right reasons, they'll appreciate those stories. But I think at some point, these movies will become so old, and so I hate the word use antiquated because it sounds disrespectful. I don't mean that, but they are going to age. They're not going to age well given where technology will eventually go. So I think at some point someone will say, hey, I think it's time. Let's pull the plug. Let's reboot this thing. And when they do reboot it, yes, it'll probably be a brand new Luke Skywalker, a brand new Han Solo. It may be the exact same story. There might be slight variations to the story, right? You just don't know. But I don't know that that's necessarily an unhealthy thing, right? I feel like that whatever it takes to keep the legacy of Star Wars and George Lucas's vision more thematically than the actual story about light versus good, father and son, family relationships, right? All of that stuff, as long as that's still in there, that part of the DNA, I'm for it. I'm actually okay with that happening. I don't want to see it in my lifetime. Let's just be clear, but I think it will happen at some point. One thing that we've talked about, and we've talked about this so many times, that we both wanted to see is if they just took the audio from the original trilogy and then threw on the animation. You guys remember when they were doing the shorts?
Galaxy of Adventures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they just did a whole series, like give us the animated, use all the same dialogue, all the same sound effects, but just giving us a very updated, fresh animation, I think that would be one way to get people, kids, younger folks, more interested in the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy. I know that sounds crazy, but that's another one. But they're kind of like, oh, this is kind of a slog at times. They are not really that into that, but that would be a nice way to kind of reface it, put a fresh new paint on it, and still retain a lot of that spirit and all the wonderful things that we love about the movies that we grew up with. So that's my opinion. Jonesy, I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I don't think any of this happen. I think it will happen in our lifetimes, Albert. Sorry to say. Maybe
I'm
maybe
checking out here in a few years. I don't know.
Right.
About you,
Yeah, things might end more quickly. I think it won't be until after George Lucas passes, though. I think they would probably do that. And Bender in the chat said it would be a little disrespectful, I think, to bring the original actors in. I tend to agree with that. I think it would be fresh actors, fresh, a different modern style of movie making. To Albert's point, the way that the style made in the 70s and 80s is so very different than what we have now. And you could see that just in the original trilogy, prequel trilogy, and sequel trilogy, how it's evolved over time.
Right.
I completely agree. I've always been I love the animation style of Galaxy of Adventures. I thought the way they were doing those storytellings and these short clips, and the way they were still integrating those voiceovers that were straight lifted out of the movies were still so impactful, and you could do it in a little over the top way, and you could do it in a more modern way. And yes, I understand that's animation, not live action, but with the way that CGI and stuff was working, I love CGI type of move. I love cinematics, like in the video games, like, so, the Old Republic and World of Warcraft, all of the, like Blizzard, the way that they do their cinematics in video games are just so incredible. And there's a ton of studios that do this so well. Can you do something like that to where you kind of bridge the world between these things? So you're not necessarily live action, but you're still incorporating the legacy of it without really doing a hard reboot from an actor standpoint, to where you could really damage careers in this way too, right? And I think, to be fair, you have to be really careful. And if I'm an actor and I'm offered that kind of part, it could be a role of a lifetime, but it also comes with a lot of baggage. And I think this kind of depends on where you jump in at. And I think while they'll probably do it, it's a huge risk, because I think it could really hurt the franchise overall and the brand of Star Wars if it doesn't go well. And there's such a challenge right now with whether people associate or connect with the content that's being produced, that you have to kind of wonder if that's the right call anytime soon, or do we just kind of keep going back to these pockets in between, right? Of these stories in between that we can kind of do, like the Ewan McGregor news we'll talk about here in a minute. But yeah. So I loved the Galaxy of Adventures. I wish they would do more of that, because I thought that was a great way of bringing new people in, of saying, hey, look at this, doesn't that look cool? Yeah, that does look cool. I like that.
I mean, to date, there's not, and feel free to check me on this, but really, objectively, to date, I don't know that there's a franchise that hasn't, become irrelevant at some point, right? Hasn't fallen out of favor with the general public. Star Wars, we'd like to think that it will continue on and live on, and maybe it's because of bad decisions and that sort of thing. But at some point, it may not be as relevant, and that's when companies and studios will come in and say, "Look, it's time to start over. It's time for a fresh start," and that's when the reboot happens. I agree with you, so too. It's a fine point that Jonesy made about this won't happen as long as Lucas is alive. That would be definitely disrespectful, and I don't think Disney has it in them to do it. Plus, they've got a whole lot of stuff that they still want to try out to see if this goes well for them before we get there. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, hopefully it happens for all the good reasons and it's successful.
Right on.
Where do you stand? Did we get the answer right? Can we call a friend 50-50?
I had my hand right over the button to remove you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, here on the podcast, on Star Wars Stuff Podcast, I mean, every opinion is welcomed.
Let's talk about the last
we try to
Jedi
stay on
while
the
we're here,
positive
then.
side, but I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, everyone has different opinions. Everyone has different views. Everyone grew up in different spots in the country. Everyone had different parents, different people that brought them up. I mean, everyone has different views of it. Yeah, I mean, I just see the original trilogy being rebooted. I mean, it's just a feeling I have. Ask me 10 years ago, I would say no way, no how.
Yeah,
blasphemy.
I'll be right there with you. Yeah,
but the more and more the time goes on, I was like a big canon guy. I was like, you cannot break canon. You cannot break canon. Disney is doing it right. The books, the comics, the movies, the TV shows, it's all within one canonical timeline. But now, not so much. The stuff in like Visions, I love it. I mean, all those different stories that are kind of outside of canon, per se, quasi outside of canon. But I mean, doing different stories outside of canon would be fantastic, I think. That's my opinion on that. But I feel like everything's gonna eventually be rebooted. I think that's just my opinion.
That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah,
It's just a matter. It's not a matter of if, but when.
It's just a matter of time. We get Back to the Future rebooted. Matter of time before we already essentially got the Lord of the Rings rebooted in a way as a TV show,
Which I've actually enjoyed. Like, I know it's kind of blasphemous and it doesn't really align with, purist Tolkien, but I've actually kind of enjoyed it. It's been fun to watch.
And that's Rings of Power takes place in the Second Age as opposed to later on. But there is going to be kind of a sort of what we're kind of talking about here with another major franchise, a little bit of a proof of concept with Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings with the War of the Rohirrim coming out in December. It's going to be an animated
can't wait.
piece of the story in Peter Jackson's trilogy that he created, and it's going to be interesting to see, like, are people going to accept that? Because I really love your guys' idea of lifting the audio and putting it on like the Galaxy Adventures type of animation. Those like shorts were incredible. I loved them.
Watch them all the time still.
Yeah.
They're still out there for anybody that wants to see them.
So, yeah, we shall see what happens with the War of the Rohirrim and see if that is a success. But
since we're already spiraling out of control here,
this is par for the course for
Okay,
Star
cool.
podcast.
I have another question that comes up in the same kind of vein that when we're talking about Star Wars and the evolution of Star Wars. One of the things that I think, even back when I joined the show many years ago now, and right after Jonesy joined as well, we were always debating about, with the Disney purchase, will we ever see a rated R Star Wars? Right? Will we ever see Star Wars content rated R?
We brought that up a couple podcasts ago.
So, and I remember back in like whatever it was when I joined, 2016, whatever it was, I remember saying, yeah, we probably will. And I got so much crap from Mike, the original, and I think he still hates me to this day because I brought this up. Because in his mind, he was like, that is absolutely blasphemous. That is not what George Lucas would do. And I agree, like, that is absolutely not what George Lucas would do. He would never go down that path. There are other stories, plenty of other stories that you can tell that don't have to cross into rated R. But to something that you said earlier, David, and something that we say a lot on the show is that we have to acknowledge that Star Wars is much bigger than it ever was, right? It appeals to so many different. It's a whole genre in itself, right? And so when you go down that path, it's not hard for executives to say, okay, well, let's push the envelope. Let's get to a PG-13 rating. Let's see how we do. There's a brand new audience that you pull in at that point. All right. At some point, they likely will do something that's rated R. And I'm not saying they're going to go with gratuitous sex or gratuitous violence, but there will be enough in there that it will push it to a rated R rating. And honestly, there are some stories, like if I really want, like the Sith is what comes to mind. If I truly want, let's say they go back to the old Republic, and they want to tell these cutthroat, never know what's going to happen to this Sith Lord at the end of every episode, at the end of every season kind of thing, some series of sorts, or maybe it's a movie.
Anthology.
Yeah, that could really get dark. And that's kind of expected from Star Wars. I know, a lot of it's implied and we know what they do and we can see it without getting into the gruesome violence of it all. But at the same time, that's the avenue, right? The dark side is a pathway to, what the line is. But I could see where it could happen. So maybe I wasn't so much for it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but in the last probably 5 to 10, I've kind of opened up, and I don't necessarily hate the idea. But I don't know. Jonesy, are you ready to leave the Cantina cast after I said that? Because I don't.
We've actually not really talked about
I know.
this.
I was saying, like, I was just thinking about that. I was like, I don't know. I hope I just didn't put my foot in my mouth here.
Oh, yeah. We haven't really talked about this in any kind of detail. And it's kind of been a show idea I've thought about. Do we need to revisit? Because I kind of don't think they will do a rated R. I don't know that I don't think I want rated R. I maybe this is the purest side of me of it's still fundamentally kind of meant for kids, even though there are brutal moments. And I think we saw that in The Acolyte too, right? That kind of pushed the boundary where we had brutality, like brutal violence, right? Of snapping Yord's neck and, point blank, killing and stuff. And we've seen some of this before, but maybe just not quite to that extent. And I think they can still accomplish what they need to accomplish without going down the paths of what is popular these days with very popular content like The Boys or House of the Dragon or other content that's really done that and been successful with it. But there's still a wholesomeness to Star Wars too that's still somewhat family oriented that I think they don't need to. And I think and Bender had a question if you could change one thing about Star Wars. I think, and to Albert's point, if you bring like in the old Republic, you have great stories there that can shift to dark. They're very complex characters, a lot of great things you can do with it. You don't necessarily have to go into those lines if you don't really want to. And I know with Deadpool in particular on the Marvel side, we've seen it's been very successful, for all three movies. And Disney seems to be okay in that little corner in the little pocket, right? But I think that's still just a very unique character. And does Star Wars fit with that type of gratuitousness and all of the things that they do? I think the answer is generally no, right? And I would rather them explore some of these stories. I'd like for them to see like Legends come back, actually. I think it would be kind of fun to put Legends as an actual timeline in television and animation and maybe even live action, and not be competing timelines or canon versus all of that, but acknowledge that Legends exist. They're already doing it in the books. Mm-hmm. So why not do it in kind of maybe like a what if type of scenario, but I think just acknowledging that there's great content there if you don't want to canonize it, very much like Visions, and you kind of make it canon adjacent in some ways. I think that'd be very fun, but I don't think you have to go the rated R route with Star Wars. I think it's violent enough with saying PG-13. It's like, what else are you looking to do? You wanting to add language? Does that really add anything to it? Because Star Wars has its own swearing language you can get away with at PG-13. Right. So the only thing left is really gratuitous violence or sex scenes, right?
Yeah.
And
Temptation of the Force, baby.
Yeah, there's spiciness out there. No joke there.
They do it in the book, so I'm just saying. Well, maybe we'll get to that topic here in a little bit later.
What fan fiction are you reading these days?
It's at the end of the book. It's like chapter 53 or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's way out.
They do the deed, man.
They do. They actually go into a lot of details.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to bring up, if you just go across the hall at Disney, the Marvel people have already delved into rated R material. But yeah, it's ultra successful. But I don't really hear like people like knocking on the doors. We want rated R Star Wars, so that the demand I don't think really is there.
Fair. People want really dark Star Wars. I think to Albert's point before, they want those really dark stories. If we explore the Sith, we feel like we might have to be flexible enough to go there. And if the story takes you there, so be it. And I think with the Sith, and we talked a little bit about this with the acolyte of these characters that are dark side and being potentially maybe not romantically involved, but physically involved. And that has a certain story element to it that you could see take it to a more of a rated R that is consistent with the Sith characters and with the dark side and with passion and things like that. Mm-hmm. They do make sense. I think there's a path there. Do you necessarily have to go that path? I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to get the point across.
Yeah, I agree. And what pops to my mind is The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies. They went rated R on the extended cut. And it was just orc blood. That was essentially it, and like orc beheadings. So,
which is weird because wasn't that in Lord of the Rings? So.
Well, like gratuitous.
It cut,
gratuitous.
Like you saw it, no pun intended, but it like cut just before you saw the head come up.
So it was like Game of Thrones violence type stuff happening.
Yeah.
Ish.
So Bender's question, David, what would you change about Star Wars?
What would I change about Star Wars? That's a broad question.
He says only one thing. Gosh, come on, really? I can think of 10, but yeah.
All right, well, list them, Albert.
No,
I want to hear the 10.
No, I'm not going to sit here. Go through
what would I change it like about the we need to be more specific because I would change a lot of stuff. Different things, different people, different people and roles. The fact that we're not getting a movie like at least once every 2 years, I think that's very much a shame. We're going to have to wait, 2019 to 2026 to get the first Star Wars movie back in theaters when Star Wars should exist in the theater. Now that it's owned by a huge parent company, it should be in the theaters at least once every 2 years. I mean, just all the slam dunk ideas. I say it on the podcast all the time that you could do easily. You do Revan, do Bane, do Old Republic. People want to see that. There's an appetite for that, and to go outside of canon, maybe do a Force Unleashed live action series or movie. I mean, see people like that. They waited really long to do a Mandalorian film, which is quite odd, but and just doing the things that I think a lot of people just want to see. I mean, we talked before we recorded. We talked a little bit about the Acolyte, and I think Albert and myself we didn't have an issue with it. I think we like to love it. Um, I thought Manny Jacinto's portrayal of the Stranger Chimera was terrific.
Absolutely.
I'm super hoping they continue that character and continue having him. And he's going to be in Japan at Celebration. It's going to be like one of those things. What is he going to talk about? The cancellation of his show, the cancellation of season 2. I mean, he's going to be there. He's going to be talking to people. It's like maybe they're going to announce something for him where he continues in like a Knights of Ren type situation where he like finds it or starts it off. So I don't know. There's a lot of different things. I mean, it feels like to me they need to knock out like the no brain stuff, like Plagueis, do a young Palpatine, adapt the most popular, the best books that even Disney has created. A lot of the Claudia Gray stuff. Just do that. Give us that in live action. I don't know why they're so like precious with not touching those stories and putting them in live action, because I think the big like thirst for Star Wars for fandom and just the general audience is just to see it in live action. That's where Star Wars appeared to us first, and where we all kind of fell in love with it. And it has that like supreme mystique and like the cultural significance that almost nothing out there has, that Star Wars has, that we want to see it on the big screen, and people will pay. People are still paying to see the best stuff out there. And yeah, there's so many things that we joke about it all the time on the podcast, and we're like, let's imagine if we were the president of Lucasfilm, what would you do about this situation? And we talk about it all the time. But yeah, moving on to the next topic I want to talk about before we get out of here. Ewan McGregor. There's some articles out there that talk about him potentially wanting to come back. And in particular, there is a CBR article where they got a quote from him, and I'm going to read it right here. Actually, comicbook.com got the quote, and they have an article out here. And he says, the truth is, Ewan McGregor says this, is I've talked about having to cover for doing the Obi-Wan season for years. I had to lie about I had to lie about that, and I'm not lying about this now. McGregor said at the time, I don't know. There's been no phone call to me from Lucasfilm or Disney saying, let's do another one. Obi-Wan was made as a limited series, and it's out, and people like it, which I'm very, very pleased about. I love doing it. I hope we get a chance to do another one, and I'm sure we will. I'm pretty sure, I've got a few years yet before I'm the same age as Alec Guinness was in A New Hope, so there's time to tell more stories in there. And he talks a little bit about the fact that there are a few stories to tell in the time frame, and Jonesy pointed out earlier that there's about 19 years worth of stuff. And the thing that I always talk about on the podcast is the fact that they could do an Obi-Wan season 2, have Obi-Wan training with Qui-Gon in the desert. You get Liam Neeson back as the Force Ghost. Liam Neeson has stated that he doesn't want to come back to Star Wars in that type of capacity. He feels like Star Wars has lost a little bit of its mystique, explaining things and showing us things. But you could have concurrent storylines with him and Vader. They never have to meet up again. You could just show what Vader's doing. It could be like really awesome, him with the red blade going out, hunting out the remaining Jedi. Perhaps bring in characters we know, like maybe like a Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis, tie into the video games and have a meetup there. There's so many different things you can do. What do you guys think? Are we going to get Ewan McGregor back in some capacity? He's going to be at SpaceCon in San Antonio in October. We're going to see him there. In
as is
backyard.
Every other member of Star Wars for the last 40 years. But yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be great. But what do you guys think about Ewan McGregor? Like, what's your history with Ewan as Obi-Wan? How much did you love it? I know you guys loved his portrayal as Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequels.
Well, let me go first, because this guy he's not going to shut up. He's just going to go on and on about Obi-Wan Kenobi. You should have posed the question differently. First off, I just got to say, as a completionist, what's his name? Oh God, I'm drawing from blank on his name. I was going to make a joke about Qui-Gon Jinn.
Oh,
Liam
Liam
Neeson?
Neeson.
Liam Neeson. That's my God. As a completionist, Liam Neeson is an idiot because I don't think I I don't think we've got enough information about these characters, and I love all that stuff. I love
Yeah.
knowing all the gory details, except Yoda. Yoda will always be sacred to me. Like I don't need to know where he's from, what his alien race is. Just leave that one alone. But everybody else, yeah, I want all the details. I don't, he's so well loved by Lucasfilm right now and Kathleen Kennedy that I take him at face value. It likely is that he will come back at some point. The problem is we're in this state now where they were, originally movies. Holy crap, pull this back. COVID, TV. Holy crap, COVID's over. The bubble just burst. Pull it back. So we're basically resetting now. So it feels like, if we were going to do a television show, we're probably 3 to 5 years. And that's, I think, very generous in terms of when we would even start something like that. So, unless they're going to go back and tell stories where he's a little bit younger, I would, maybe they just line it up. Like, I think we were talking about this before we came on air, I believe, but I like the idea of having it kind of take place right on the cusp of A New Hope and end and lead right into A New Hope, similar to like Rogue One in some aspects, right? I would like to see that rather than try to do something else. Although there is a lot of time there, we have to keep in mind that Obi-Wan Kenobi's primary responsibility is to sit there and watch and protect, keep over the chosen one, right? Because he believes that is a chosen. Luke Skywalker is a chosen one. This was debated a lot too. When that series came out, we were talking a lot about whether or not Kenobi would leave, right? And because for the same argument, he would be landlocked, and that may not be the best television. I mean, Tatooine really isn't that happen of a place. So we
could go to Jakku instead.
Well, yeah, no, nobody wants to go back to Jakku. But you want them to be able to leave, and so we kind of theorize that they're probably going to leave the planet, as as weird as that may sound, since his primary duty is to watch over Luke. But I don't know that they could do that again, and so. What does that story look like, right? What does that story look like where he is primarily landlocked again on Tatooine? Is there an opportunity for him to leave kind of thing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I do like the idea of just kind of continuing the story with him as he aged. And in short, I mean, hell yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi was just one of my favorites growing up. I saw myself as Luke and having that mentor and being, putting yourself in that mindset. I mean, there's just something special about that, the elder figure to kind of go back to the hero's journey, right? And kind of giving them the call to action. There's just something about that resonated with me as a child. And with Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness's work, I mean, it's just been one of the more consistent quality characters that's come out of Star Wars. So, Jonesy, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, the god-awful beard in Attack of the Clones aside from the reshoots, which I have to acknowledge every single time was an absolute atrocity, to the amazing beard that Ewan McGregor can grow on his own. He's been like a treasure for us, right? He stepped into that role and just made it his own, but also just channeled Alec Guinness so well and continued to deliver on that throughout the prequel trilogy, rather, and then throughout the Kenobi series. I think it was great. So there's always an interest of wanting him to come back and do more. But I think to Albert's point of there has to be the right story in there. And will it feel a little too much like, oh, he's got to bring people away to deter and protect Luke by distracting them and leading them off planet again, kind of a similar vibe there. Not like we haven't done this successfully in the past with Force Awakens, but I mean, those types of things, do they feel like, are they actually fresh and interesting at that point? I think that's the challenge, is what story do you tell? I think there's the path is an interesting aspect, but do you need Obi-Wan Kenobi to do that successfully? Or could you make that more about Quinlan Vos, maybe now Asajj Ventress, right?
Yep.
So are there other characters you could leverage that continue the things started in Kenobi, but maybe only use him as more of a cameo rather than the actual focal point? Because again, his job is to sit there and be boring and watch out for Luke Skywalker to make sure that he grows up and is able to be trained when it's ready, when the galaxy needs him. And when we see him in A New Hope, he is older, he is slower, he's still very powerful, but it's clear that he's lived this hermit lifestyle. So to give him all these adventures in the meantime kind of feels like we've walked some things back from the original vision of what George Lucas had, right? Of the mentor and the hermit and reclusive nature and sacrificing oneself for the greater good and for this very special person, right? And then this lineage that is going to save the galaxy. So our excitement notwithstanding, it's difficult to see what story that doesn't feel like it waters down some of the stuff that comes later. Where I would rather us start to veer and say, hey, we've got a couple of characters we haven't really explored. We can piggyback and start to leverage some of that and maybe go back and intertwine and do some limited, maybe appears in an episode or two of Ewan McGregor. But that's not the core of the story, and we're taking it in a fresh new direction. I would probably like to see something more along those lines and a little bit of a peer mentorship, because there's a relationship between Kenobi and Quinlan Vos that was explored in the Dark Disciple novel really, really well, and there's a lot there too. So I think and there's a history with Asajj and Obi-Wan. So those are ways you could bring him back in, and you could actually do it in a compelling way, but not make it about him, but actually further the story and deepen the story of all the other things that happened in this era with Star Wars, and we lead into the original trilogy days.
So all I heard from that was that you want that Pelimato origin story. Is that true?
I think we need all the Pelimato things and all the Jawa comments, and we need to see the rated R version of Pelimato and the
You're
Jawas.
Done. You're done. That's disgusting.
Hey, you led us to this dark path. So
Oh yeah, if you want to know about the sexual habits of Jawas, just hit me up offline.
if you want to meet cantinacast.com/Patreon. No,
Was that the fan fiction you were referring to? Really?
No, God, no.
He has volumes of it.
I have volumes, but not of Jawas. That's for sure.
Definitely a Pelimato. Yeah.
Yeah, no. The
Ask him
other
about
thing,
Maz.
Okay, stop. No, we're not going to get Maz Kanata involved. The other thing that this spinning up a new series, well, I say this, and I think if they did spin up another series, my mind goes to, okay, well, I guess Vader's back, and maybe I guess he doesn't have to be back, but is that really a compelling story? If they did go to Vader, though, for me, then that starts to poo-poo over the way that series ended, tying that to the circle is now complete. When I last left you, I was with Learner, now I'm the master. That was a nice little way to kind of bookend that and kind of tie it back, and that's how I interpreted it. But if they brought him back again, then it's like, okay, well then how many times did they actually meet? Because it was, I don't know. It to Jonesy's point, it does start to feel kind of watered down unless there's a really genuine story, and it's gonna have to be on Tatooine, and so maybe it's, I don't know, he needs groceries, and that's the excitement. Who knows? But
Goes to work for Jabba the Hutt.
yeah, there you go. Could do that too.
So before the Obi-Wan series premiered, I thought he was not going to leave Tatooine. I thought he was going to stay on Tatooine. I thought we were going to explore like his dreams and nightmares and do flashbacks of the Clone Wars and get that aspect of it.
That would have
and
been
see
fun.
him during the day, like rummaging for food, trying to get by, trying to hide his true identity, and then at night going through the whole PTSD of it all and delving back, and we see like a younger Obi-Wan, younger Anakin, and maybe explore some stories and happenings that we didn't get in the Clone Wars animation, and tie all that together and lead into that, and getting Darth Vader back.
That would be fun. Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah,
getting Darth Vader back too. I mean, like I said, they never have Obi-Wan and Darth Vader never have to converge again, but you could just almost have like an Obi-Wan Vader type series, but you could just call it Obi-Wan season. I mean, just the naming convention. So I would really like to see something like that. I hope that's like one of my like biggest hopes for that to happen. But of course, I'm not pitching this to Lucasfilm. Oh, someone listens to this podcast and steals my idea. That'd be great. But yeah, I think Ewan is coming back. I think Ewan's coming back in some capacity, and I think Hayden Christensen is also coming back. There was someone at an event sitting very close by to Hayden Christensen and his agent, and they overheard them talking about reprising Vader again, apparently, and this is from a trusted source too. So Hayden's doing a bunch of conventions. Like I said, he'll be at SpaceCon in October in my backyard in San Antonio, Texas. He's doing a lot of stuff like that. If you can get his autograph, it's sold up. Get it now, because it might skyrocket after they announce like a Vader trilogy or a Vader series or whatever. So, yeah, I think Ewan's coming back. He's too beloved. Works too well with. They're gonna figure something out to get him back in the fold, and we'll all be there for it, of course. Hopefully, that'd be nice if it was theatrical. I mean, I think that's.
That would be
We're kind of
nice.
starved as fans after the pandemic and everything that's gone on, and having to stay up till midnight, but now of course they're doing it at 7 o'clock for TV shows. Having that communal experience again at the theater, going to the theater, having all the hype for an actual film coming out, it feels like it's been a really long time. It feels like it's been longer than 2019, to tell you the truth.
With the cost of the TV series on Disney Plus now, I think you've almost got to go back into theaters in order to get that money back, because it just sounds like they're not able to recover the money in a more direct way, right? It's difficult to see what's moving the needle, and if you put it in the theaters, you at least know what you got to go get, but you're more exposed to to what a flop looks like. As we kind of found out with Solo, everything's under a microscope.
Right. And I mean, does it surprise you guys that this is kind of the route that we've gone, like not having movies in theaters where like that like is like the true moneymaker for the franchise, and them like trying to do the whole kind of streaming thing and trying to get like to compete almost like with Netflix and try and get as many subscribers as they have, and then it plateauing and then pulling back and saying we're going to concentrate on films now, and the stock price like plummeting for Disney and that whole thing. It's kind of like to me it was simple math. It was like, no, you don't want to do that. You want to put Star Wars movies back in the theater where you can actually make some money off box office and then the merchandise, and have the whole like snowball for the money to come in. But it's interesting that they've gone this route.
It feels weird. I would agree. But I think if you really look at just kind of what happened, and trust me, I'm so tired of blaming COVID for everything, but it really did have an impact on the movie industry.
Yeah.
And we're still reeling from that. I mean, you look at the numbers, every once in a while we have some big blockbusters, and then we hear that, theaters are failing. I mean, look at the price at theaters and how much they're paying or charging now just to kind of break even on things. The theater that I go to has like no staff. And I know this because my son works there. They've got like 2 people that are running the whole theater from like the last 3 hours, right? Because they're just trying to cut costs at every opportunity. So there are still some lasting impacts. There are some residual things. So when you look at the context of how we got here, it makes sense. It sucks because, yeah, you're right. It feels like we should have a movie every 3 years from Star Wars. And that was kind of the deal that was promised to us when this whole deal was done back in 2015. But, it's about normalizing at this point, right? They've gone one way, it didn't work. They've gone another way, it didn't work. This is not something that's unique to Star Wars either. This is just executives at big movie companies doing what all the other same ones are doing. They're making decisions. They're trying to figure this out. It's not George Lucas saying there going, I'm going to put this movie out, and I don't care how much it costs. I don't care what the reviews say. I don't care about streaming services. I want to put this story. I want to tell this story. That is the way Lucas ran his business, and that's a very old school way now compared to what we see. And I don't know that that's ever going to change. So it feels weird that it's happening to, quote, our Star Wars, but that's just the reality of it. And I think it's going to, unfortunately, continue. This is not the first time we're going to hit a bumpy road, and it still may continue to be bumpy. But, that's just the way the industry goes, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, the industry isn't helping itself.
Yeah.
They're once they release a film, a month or 2 later, it's on like on-demand video.
Exactly.
They've taught the public to just wait, and you don't really have to go see this. Just wait. It'll be on Netflix. It'll be on Peacock or Paramount Plus or Disney Plus. So,
and it's unpopular, but I mean, Disney's acknowledged that and actually come out and said it to their investors. For those that really get into the investor calls like we do, we get into the weeds on some of this stuff.
Yeah, we do.
It's a barn burner. Let me tell you, it's a page turner of a piece of content. But they come out and say this, and this is why we're starting to see a little bit longer lead times. Kind of like when things used to come out on Blu-ray and DVD, we had to wait several months for that to happen in order to also drum up that excitement. Hey, let's sap as much from the theaters as we possibly can, but then also let's start to drum up that excitement and that anticipation of I want to go back and rewatch that and own that. And we've seen that get away to where Disney wants to start pushing their physical media again too. So we're seeing a reset in the company and maybe trying to find what is the happy balance between some of this. And the pendulum has been swinging pretty wildly, at least in the media and things like that, and often based on what they've said in particular. But I think we'll start to see that settle down a little bit more here pretty soon too, because we saw Marvel really falter with this, where they couldn't get anything wrong there for a while leading up to the Infinity Saga, right? And then since then, some things have been pretty good, some content on both Disney Plus and the movies, but then there's been a lot of things that just haven't resonated with people and haven't done very well financially. And that's the type of thing that you can't keep spending all this money and then not getting any money back and then expect to want to do more of that too. So very focused. And this is, we talked about sequel trilogy stuff and maybe where that had some challenges too, of just trying to pump things out just to meet the schedule without a lot of forethought and really, true planning. So how do we do this better? Right. And I think that's the part that's hard. And I don't think we should minimize that the challenges are there to come up with good stories, have good people, and get someone to commit for not 5 years, but like 10 years, right? That's really tough to do. And signing them up is very expensive too. And you're asking them to keep, basically keep someone on retainer. And those types of things are not necessarily, they're commonplace in many circles, but it's also an expensive proposition to be able to do it. So, it's not an enviable position, but they want to make money from us. It's a symbiotic relationship, so to speak, right? They need to produce something that's really going to resonate with us to where we want to do it. And I'm with you, David. I think it belongs in the theater, right? It's an experience. Seeing it with other people, enjoying it with your friends, enjoying it with strangers, hearing the crowds cheer, seeing people waving lightsabers and that buzz and that electricity of being in the theater, the big sound, and now they've got the D-box and other things that will rattle your brains out or whatever. So all those types of things that's what makes Star Wars fun, right? And watching it at home is fine and convenient, but it's still not that experience. And people are willing to pay for that experience if there's that return from the consumer side too. That is something that they can really get behind and champion, and get people to go watch it, elsewhere besides their small clicks.
I agree.
Oh, go ahead.
And on Facebook says, do you think we will get an Ahsoka season 2? Maybe Ewan can show up that way somehow. Yes, we are going to get an Ahsoka season 2. Filoni has written it. I think it's in pre-production, right?
They just started
it right now.
They just started the pre-production filming.
Yeah.
Like about 2 weeks ago, maybe 30 days ago-ish now. But yeah, very recently it's already started filming. So
yeah, we should get some footage in Japan for Celebration 2025. And I'll be there. I think Albert will be there.
I got my tickets.
Jonesy? No?
I will not be there this time.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, yeah, we should get that. We should get Mandalorian Grogu stuff at that point, because it comes out a year after. And we all know they've been shooting. They gave that D23, like CGI created, like, very minimal shots that they had that they've been, I think, no Pedro, but I think probably like Brendan Wayne, Lateef Crowder stuff.
And we turned that small clip into a 1 hour show. Bam.
That's how we
I think we did too.
Did you? Okay. It's like, we're going to milk this thing. Look at frame by frame. We're going to look at every single detail in this trailer.
Oh, yeah.
But in blurry vision.
In blurry vision, yeah.
Have you guys ever been to D23?
No, I've never been.
Okay.
Until
Jonesy,
recently.
are you a D23 member?
I am I a D23 member? No,
you
I don't
used
think
to
I
be,
am.
I thought. But
I think we used to be, but I'm not anymore. I've thought about it, but until recently, there wasn't enough. They weren't really using it as a Star Wars expo where Star Wars had that much of a presence. But the last couple have been a little bit different. So, yeah, maybe it's time to think about the D23 membership. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Disney's got enough of my money in all the other ways. So, I mean, why not? Why not find a new avenue to give them cash?
Frickin' shill.
Yeah, I'm definitely considering going next year. Maybe you guys can go too. Maybe we
That'd
can
be
hang. So yeah, just definitely want to be respectful of your guys' time. I want to end the podcast here. Great conversation, guys. I hope you guys come back. We can have more fun talking about Star Wars stuff, and you definitely are invited back. I'm just glad I got you on tonight because I know you guys are super busy. You guys podcast a whole lot. You're doing a whole bunch of other things. Family. I mean, I got 2 jobs. I have no idea what some of the stuff you guys have going on in your lives. But and Albert pointed out earlier, he has 5 kids. I don't know how you podcast with 5 kids. My kids are adults now, so I really don't have to worry about them anymore. But my gosh, man.
Straight jackets and chains, usually.
Right. Puts them in the cage and feeds them sandwiches.
Lots of NyQuil. Yeah, whatever it takes.
Whiskey on the gums.
No, whoa, hey.
He's kidding, guys. He's kidding.
Okay, easy.
I hope.
Easy.
Yeah, this is really fun. I mean, it's kind of cool because we got this Texas connection going too. So it's
I didn't point
where-
that out. That Jonesy, you're in a certain part of Texas. Can we say?
Yeah, I'm in the Houston area. Yeah.
Okay, Houston area. And then Albert is
I'm in Austin.
Austin. And I'm 50 miles south of Albert. So almost in San Antonio.
Yep.
I'm in the sticks. So yeah, for Jonesy, Albert, my name is David, and may the force be with you.